The NBA recently released a list of the top 75 greatest players in their history, voted on by former players, media, and coaches. And just like every other list out there, it's subjective. Even when the NBA released their original 50 greatest players list in 1996, there was a lot of debate about who was missing from that list and who arguably should not be on the list. For the 75 list, the NBA mostly kept all the players from the original 50 list and added 26 more, for a total of 76 players because there was a tie in voting. I, of course, like most people, disagree with some selections on the list. The list overall I felt was a bit biased towards older players, partly out of respect for the original 50 list, and not enough modern players get their due. In addition, just like every other list out there, the list does not contain ABA players who I always felt got disrespected. There are a few other lists out there floating around by various popular YouTubers. Johnny Arnett posted his top 75 list. That was decided by voters on his Discord channel. But just like every list that was determined by voting, this ends up being a popularity contest, and most modern fans tend to be more biased towards modern players, swinging it the other way. Jimmy High Roller posted a video on his list of the top 75 players that is supposedly based on the numbers but adds in two very subjective categories, one based on shot making that is not related to shooting and doesn't seem to be based on anything except his own opinion, and another one based on influence and impact, which also seems to be based purely on his own opinion. For example, why is T-Mac 10 spots above Michael Jordan on the shot making list? And having Kobe number 1 on shot making is kind of ironic given that he's the all-time leader in missed shots, isn't it? So how's that being determined? Why isn't George Mikan or Bob Cousy, two of the most influential pioneers of basketball history, not on the influence and impact list? Some of the most important rules in basketball history were actually instated because of George Mikan's influence, such as the shot clock, goaltending, and widening of the lane. So why isn't George Mikan on here? What about Yao Ming, a player that almost single-handedly made basketball popular in China and brought the NBA a billion fans? Why is he not on the list? Also, he's missing Rick Barry from the Finals MVP list, so there's a few mistakes on that list. I want to make my own top 75 list, except I want to remove all the subjectivity from it, or as much as possible. That means every category and criteria in my list has to be based on something that can be found on Basketball Reference, the popular basketball statistics website. The idea is very similar to Jimmy High Rollers, except I won't be using any subjective categories. I will instead be assigning every award points and combine a player's awards with their regular season and playoff average stats and career totals, as well as advanced metrics to combine them all together for a composite score and rank based on that. There's also various sports media publications doing their own top 75 list, all of which are based on a combination of subjective and objective criteria. None of them are entirely fair lists because they are leaving out awards for older players and excluding ABA players from the rankings. Ultimately, I want this to be as fair and objective as possible, so that's why there's two things I'll be doing on this list that every other list has failed to do. The first thing is to retroactively assign older players awards that didn't exist in their era. MVP didn't exist until 1956, so for players prior to 1956, I will assign them MVPs based on which player led the league in total win shares. While not perfect, it's reasonable to assume that whichever player gave their team the most wins should get the award. Finals MVPs didn't exist until 1969, so for players prior to 1969, I will look up their stats in the finals to determine who should get the award. All defensive didn't exist until 1969 as well, so for players prior to 1969 for all defensive, I'll be using defensive win shares to calculate this award. Finally, Defensive Player of the Year didn't exist until 1983, so for players prior to 1983, I will be basing it on which player led the league in defensive win shares. This way, older players have the same awards that modern players have, which is more fair. You can see how this can affect the rankings of players like Bill Russell and George Mikan now that we give them the modern awards that they rightfully deserve. The second thing I will do is to include ABA awards and stats in the total. I feel very strongly about the ABA being a part of NBA history. The NBA merged with the ABA and took four of their teams, the Pacers, Nets, Nuggets, and Spurs, and also took the three-point shot and dunk contest from the ABA. Although the NBA does not officially count ABA stats and awards, I've always thought that this was very unfair to ABA players, and thus to be fair to ABA players, I'll be including them in this list. Fortunately, Basketball Reference does count ABA awards and stats and lists them as part of a player's career. This will help bring to light a lot of forgotten great players who only played in the ABA, such as Roger Brown and Mel Daniels, as well as enhance a lot of NBA players' resumes who had the majority of their achievements in the ABA, such as Artis Gilmore, Connie Hawkins, Dan Issel, and George McGinnis. Also, may I add the fact that sometimes media publications treat the ABA very inconsistently. For the most part, it seems like they acknowledge some of Dr. J's ABA career, but virtually no other ABA player's career gets recognized. How many times have you seen this greatest players of each franchise graphic? See Dr. J there as a net, which means his ABA career counts, but inexplicably Reggie Miller is on the Pacers, as if Roger Brown, Mel Daniels, and George McGinnis's ABA careers didn't exist. That's being inconsistent. So here are the categories. MVP is the category that I give the most points to. 15 points per MVP. This is the most prestigious individual award a player can have, so it makes sense for this category to get the most points. Finals MVP, I feel is equally as valuable as MVP is, thus I also give Finals MVP 15 points as well. Championships I split into two categories. Championships as a top 3 player on the team, and championships as a role player, which means you are not a top 3 player on the team. Clearly, a ring run by Michael Jordan or Scottie Pippen is not the same as a ring won by Steve Kerr or Robert Horry. Championships as a top 3 player on the team are worth 12 points, and championships as a role player are worth half that, 6 points. First team All-NBA, first team All-Defensive, Defensive Player of the Year, scoring titles, rebounding titles, All-Star MVPs, and assist titles are all worth 6 points each. They are great individual awards, but players can win many of them. Rookie of the Year is also worth 6 points. Second team All-NBA, second team All-Defensive are worth 3 points each. They definitely are not as valuable as first team selections or leading the league in a category, hence why they are worth half as much. Finally, All-Star appearances are only worth 1 point each, as they are the easiest award for any all-time player to obtain. Note that third team All-NBA is not counted because this award started in 1989, which is far later than most of the older players on the list. It's also nearly impossible to retroactively determine who would have been third team All-NBA prior to 1989, so I will just exclude any All-NBA third teams from this list. Then I add on a player's career points per game, rebounds per game, assists per game, playoff points per game, rebounds per game, and assists per game, true shooting percentage instead of field goal percentage because true shooting percentage adds in the player's free throw percentage as well, which is more comprehensive, PER, and win shares per 48 to determine a player's statistical resume. I also feel that longevity does matter, but not too much, so I add on a player's career points, rebounds, assists, and win shares, but make them weigh a little bit less than the average stats in the ranking total, as to not totally favor the players who have played longer. Note that I don't count steals and blocks because those stats weren't tracked until 1974, and again, it's another category that's nearly impossible to measure and count retroactively, so I will ignore those stats in this ranking to make it more fair for the older players. Then I add together the combination of award totals, average stats, and career totals to determine a player's ranking. This, I feel, is the most comprehensive ranking of all NBA players yet. There are over 300 players that have been ranked, from Jumpin' Joe Falks to Zion Williamson. The spreadsheet can be viewed in the description below the video if you're curious. So this is the NBA's official top 75 list, which actually has 76 players in it due to a tie in voting. My list differs by 17 players. Now keep in mind, this is all according to each player's resume, their stats and awards, so I don't necessarily agree with my own list, and I know a lot of people will have issues with these removals, but these are the players that would be removed according to my algorithm. So the first player to be removed is James Worthy. Worthy is just outside of my top 75. The main reason why Worthy isn't higher is because of his lack of All-NBA selections. Now keep in mind, I don't count All-NBA third teams. He didn't lead the league in any category, and no All-Defensive also hurts him. The second player is Billy Cunningham. The Kangaroo Kid is also just outside my top 75. His only championship was when he was a 6th man, and he wasn't a top 3 option on the team, which hurts him. And no All-Defensive or leading the league in any category as well. These kind of things do matter when you're sitting right at the fringe of the top 75. Third player is Jerry Lucas. Lucas sits just outside the top 75 as well. The main reason is Lucas's playoff numbers fall behind his great regular season numbers by quite a bit. There's no all-defensive selections, and his only championship was when he was coming off the bench, and it's enough to take him off the top 75. The fourth player is Dominique Wilkins. Yes, Dominique was a great player, but his lack of championships or MVPs or all-defensive hurts him a lot, and only 3 All-NBA selections and a lot of All-Star appearances unfortunately isn't enough to get on the list. The fifth player is Bill Walton. It should be obvious why Walton doesn't make the list. All his awards come from only 2 really good seasons, and his career totals is severely lacking. The sixth player is Damian Lillard. Dame's career isn't long enough. He doesn't have any All-NBA first team selections or a championship or All-Defensive or MVPs to make the list. The seventh player to be removed is Bill Sharman. Sharman had 4 rings, but he wasn't a top 3 player for any of them if you look up his stats in the finals. So that reduces the value of his championships a lot, and that's the main reason actually he made the original top 50 list in the first place. The 8th player to be removed is Ray Allen. Allen has a lot of All-Star appearances, but he only has one All-NBA second-team selection, one ring as a top 3 player on the team, and one ring as a role player. Unfortunately, that's not enough to get on the list. The 9th player is Carmelo Anthony. Like Allen, he has a lot of All-Star appearances, but only 2 All-NBA second-team selections and no rings. That's not enough for a top 75 appearance. The 10th player to be removed is Hal Greer. The top 75 list is a very difficult list to make, as even a bunch of All-Star, All-NBA selections and being a top 3 player on a championship team wasn't enough for Greer to make it. Greer needs more All-NBA first-team selections or leading the league in a category, or an MVP or Finals MVP to make the list. The 11th player to be removed is Reggie Miller. It's actually quite obvious why Miller isn't on the list. He only has All-Star appearances. That's it. He doesn't have any All-NBA first or second-team selections, no MVPs, no All-Defensive, and no championships. The 12th player is Tiny Archibald. Tiny's problem is the only ring he has was when he was a role player on the Celtics, and his averages dropped noticeably in the playoffs, hence he has a much lower ranking here. The 13th player is Dave Bang. What's there to say? He was only 3-time All-NBA, no championships, no MVPs, no All-Defensive, and his numbers drop in the playoffs. 14th player is Nate Thurmond. The main things that hurt Nate the Great is his lack of All-NBA selections. Yes, I know it's unfair because he played with Will, Russell, and Kareem his whole career, but I'm just going by his resume. He also has no championships, and his playoff numbers dropped significantly. The 15th player is Lenny Wilkens. He has no All-NBA selections, no All-Defensive, no MVPs, didn't lead the league in any category, no championships, so he's obviously not on the top 75 list. The 16th player to be removed is Pete Maravich. He has no championships, no All-Defensive, low win shares, and a huge drop in playoff numbers, which hurts him a lot here. While Pistol Pete's raw numbers look good, and he can be considered a big influence on the game, advanced analytics are not very kind to him, and I only take the statistics and numbers into account here. The last player to be removed is Earl Monroe. The Pearl has only one All-NBA selection, his only championship was not as a top 3 player on the team, he has no All-Defensive or MVPs, he didn't lead the league in any category, and his numbers are nothing to write home about, therefore he does not make this list. And here are the 17 players that are added in their place according to my algorithm. The first player added is Artis Gilmore. Remember that I'm counting ABA achievements on my list. Counting ABA achievements, Artis Gilmore is easily the biggest snub from the original top 75 list. He's an 11-time All-Star, 5-time All-ABA first team, 4-time All-Defensive first team, led the league in rebounding 4 times, led the league in defensive win shares 4 times, has a league MVP, and won a Finals MVP as a top 2 player on the championship team. He averages 18 points and 13 rebounds a game, scored 25,000 points total in his career, and grabbed 16,000 rebounds. Gilmore should have easily made the list if ABA stats and awards were included. The second player to be added is Dwight Howard. Dwight's place on this list should be secure, and if we don't count ABA achievements, then he replaces Artis Gilmore as the biggest snub from the original list, and many people online have already commented on this already. The main reason why he gets on this list should be obvious. He's an 8-time All-Star, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, 5-time All-NBA first team, 5-time All-Defensive first team, he leads the league in rebounding 5 times, averages a career double-double, and grabbed 14,000 rebounds. That's a staggering list of achievements for any player and should have guaranteed him a place on this list. The third player to be added is Mel Daniels. Now remember, I am counting ABA players, so Daniels was one of the greatest ABA players ever, as he was a 7-time All-Star, 4-time All-ABA first teamer, led the league in rebounding 3 times, in fact he is the ABA's all-time leading rebounder, he won MVP twice, he led the league in defensive win shares once, he was a top 3 player on 2 championship teams and a role player for another one, and he averages 18 points and 15 rebounds for his career. That resume guarantees him a spot on this list. The fourth player to be added is Neil Johnston. This is a player that most modern fans have never heard of. Johnston was the best center in the league in between George Mikan and Bill Russell. He was a 6-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA first teamer. He led the league in scoring 3 times. He led the league in win shares 4 times, led the league in rebounding once, and won a championship as a top 2 player on the team. So he deserves to make this list. The fifth player to be added is George McGinnis. McGinnis makes this list due to his ABA achievements. Combined with his NBA achievements, he's a 6-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA and NBA, led the league in scoring once, has 2 championships as a top 3 player on the team, a league MVP, a finals MVP, and averaged 20 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists for his career. That's enough to make this list. Sixth player to be added is Dan Issel. Issel makes this list due to his ABA achievements as well. He was a 6-time All-Star, 5-time All-ABA, led the league in scoring once, won a championship as a top 2 player, averaged 23 points and 9 rebounds for his career, and scored over 27,000 points in his career. That's definitely enough to put him on this list as well. Seventh player to be added is Dennis Johnson. DJ makes this list because he's a 5-time All-Star, 9-time All-Defensive player, was a top 3 player on all 3 of his championship teams, has a Finals MVP, and ups his numbers in the playoffs. DJ definitely deserves to be in. The 8th player to be added is Connie Hawkins. His overall career was brief, but he did enough in both the NBA and ABA to make the list. The Hawk averaged 18 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists for his career, great all-around numbers, was a 5-time All-Star, made 3 All-NBA and ABA first teams, led the league in scoring once, had one of the best rookie seasons of all time when he won MVP, a championship, and a Finals MVP all in his first year in the ABA. The 9th player is Tom Heinsohn. Heinsohn makes this list based on being a key offensive player of the Russell Celtics dynasty. He replaces Bill Sharman on this list because he was 6-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA, and was the first or second leading scorer on 6 of his 8 championships. He literally won a championship every year of his career except for one. His playoff averages are even higher, a mark of his truly great players. That's why he makes this list. The 10th player is Spencer Haywood. Haywood had a case for the top 75, even excluding his ABA achievements, but overall, he's a 5-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA and ABA, and makes this list because of his tremendous rookie season in the ABA where he led the league in scoring and rebounding and won MVP and Rookie of the Year all in his first season in that league. In addition, he also won a championship as a role player in the NBA. The 11th player is Tony Parker. Parker should have made the original list. He was a 6-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA, top 3 player on all 4 championships that he won, a Finals MVP, and he ups his game in the postseason. Parker definitely makes this list. The 12th spot is Nikola Jokic. Jokic might be a bit early to put on this list, but his 3-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA, MVP season, and great all-around career averages, even better playoff averages, and advanced analytics love him, since he has a great PER, win shares per 48, and true shooting percentage all combined together to put him on this list. The 13th addition is Paul Gasol. Gasol was a 6-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA, top 2 player on 2 championship teams, scored over 20,000 points, grabbed 11,000 rebounds, and he has a lot of win shares, which all help him to put him on this list. The 14th addition is Bobby Jones. He was a 5-time All-Star and won a championship as a 6th man, but the main reason he makes this list is because of his staggering 11-time All-Defensive selections, including 10 first-team selections. The 15th addition is Adrian Dantley. Dantley makes this list based on his 6 All-Star appearances, 2 All-NBA selections, 2 scoring titles, averaging 24 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists for his career, scoring over 23,000 points, and just being a remarkably efficient player with 61% true shooting percentage. The 16th addition to the list is Dikembe Mutombo. Although he wasn't a scorer, he was an 8-time All-Star, 6-time All-Defensive, 2-time rebounding leader, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, and grabbed over 12,000 rebounds is why he makes this list. Finally, the last addition might be a surprising choice, but it's Rudy Gobert. I know this may be a bit shocking to a lot of viewers. The reason why he makes the list is because of his 5-time All-Defensive first-team selections, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, rebounding title, higher averages in the playoffs, his great PER of 22, and his insane true shooting percentage of 66%, which is the highest in NBA history. Now keep in mind, I'm not tracking blocks, or giving any points for leading the league in blocks, or All-NBA third teams. True shooting percentage should also be more favorable to guards than big men because it accounts for free throw percentage, which guards are usually better at. But even with all those disadvantages, Rudy still makes this list, but barely. I know, it's shocking to me as well. So this is the NBA's original top 75 list, and here's my new updated list with the replacement players colored in black. So guys, keep in mind that this isn't my subjective list at all, but a list generated from my algorithm combining a player's awards, career stats, and career totals together. I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with this list, but it's interesting to see from a perspective just how big the differences are between this one and the NBA's official one. Although I don't want to list the exact rankings on the screen and cause unnecessary heated debate, I do want to note that my algorithm ranked Earl Monroe, who is on the NBA's list, all the way down at number 171 all time, while on my list, Artis Gilmore was as high as number 20, and Dwight Howard was as high as number 32, and they didn't make the NBA's list. Again, my spreadsheet is down in the description if you want to check the exact numbers and rankings. I hope you guys learned something from this video. It was just meant to be a fun exercise in making an objective list of players, and as always, thanks for watching and subscribe to my channel if you like my content.